Yes, Amand. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Urie, this is Amanda, and it's an honor for us to be here and to be sharing whatever we know. I told somebody, if you're wise, you will be able to learn from our mistakes. So you don't have to learn by your own. This September, Amanda and I will be married 40 years. So maybe we'll be coming out of the wilderness, into Canaan, crossing over into a new place. Amen. Amanda and I were both raised in an Amish culture, and I think it's maybe a little prophetic that out of the Amish culture I ended up with a name like Urie, and here I am speaking to Russians and Ukrainians, Probably not too many other names out of that culture that would sound like one of your names. I used to say that we had what I called a bipolar relationship. And we are both pretty strong-willed. I'll use that term. And she's the only one who's almost as strong-willed as I am that I've met. So
that was supernatural, though. That kind of did that.
So I was the North Pole and she was the South Pole, and then the Lord took us to the Peruvian Amazon on missions, and we met at the equator. And God brought us together. It's kind of a prophetic story. And now that's kind of our second home, is down in the Amazon region of South America. And we both have a passion for that. We've discovered that we have a lot of other things that we have similar passions for as well. And so the Lord has really blessed us to come together and to work together and to find out that our differences actually can benefit our relationship, because we're not supposed to be the same. Yeah. Because she has strengths that I don't, I have strengths that she doesn't. Our giftings complement each other, and they're supposed to work together. So I grew up on a farm. I don't know if any of you grew up on a farm. The farm that I grew up on, we farmed with horses. And so I know something about harnessing a team together, and different demeanors, different personalities of horses, how they can work together and how they can conflict with each other. So when two horses are hitched together into a team, they have to learn to pull together. And if they do, they can pull a tremendous amount of weight, but they can be very strong, powerful horses, and if they do not pull together, they can't pull much. So what I would like to do is have each of you introduce yourselves. How many years you've been married, if you're married. If not, when you hope to get married. And what is the number one question that you would like to get answered? Maybe we should start back here with Pastor Dennis and come over here.
Questions? Do you have any questions? Is it about marriage, you mean?
Yes, yes, about your marriage relationship. Or about marriage relationships in general. We'll know you're not talking about you, of course, but.
That's a hard one.
Can you share maybe 3 things that made your marriage strong? 3 things that really you're always focused on, that builds up, continues to build up your marriage?
Sure, yeah, that's definitely something that we will get into today, yes.
My name is Olga. My husband is not here, he's working.
you been married?
7 years.
Okay.
Jak żyć w Ameryce. We are together 19 years. We are from Ukraine. After yesterday, we came into Mexico to USA, and I don't know, we want to know how serve God together, that our children will be with God all we want that our children will be missionary. How, what we need to do that will be, yes.
Okay.
This family just came to US 2 days ago.
Wow. What's the names?
Volodymyr. Volodymyr. Yeah. This is Жанна,
Shauna.
my wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ukraine, yes. Wonderful.
Hello. Amazing that you guys were married for so long. Praise the Lord. Glad you guys could be here. Can't wait to hear something from you. But my name is Vlad. My wife Alina. We've been married almost 3 years, and there are many questions, but nothing's coming to mind right now. Maybe my wife can help me. Yeah, sometimes we think our marriage, is perfect. And then,
Do you have children?
yeah, I have one boy, 2 years old.
Okay.
I guess our question. How do you continue to be close, to one another? As time goes on.
Okay.
Alright, my name is Roman and my wife Karina. We've been married 8.5 years, and also don't really have any question on my mind to ask, but I'm sure we can come back around.
Okay.
Paul. Keep it a little closer.
My name is Paul. This is my wife Olga. We've been married for 2.5 years. The only question that comes to mind is conflict resolution. There's some things that, like when it comes to even raising our 2 daughters. Well, our youngest is only 4.5 months. So our oldest is 1 and 7 months. And there's some stuff that I can be very passive about when it comes to that, and it's very important to her. This is just an example. There's of course other stuff, but I guess I find stuff that's not really important, but it's important to her, and vice versa. So obviously there's conflict in looking for a middle ground, but oftentimes I can be too stubborn, and I'm sure she could say the same, that we still will have a little conflict, so just conflict resolution, stuff like that.
My name is Serge. This is my wife Irina and our boy Moses. We've been married for almost 7 years, and the question is, how do you work together in ministry any advice, any tips, how to always be on the same page and support each other in that.
That's good.
Also, like being as a team, right, how you were saying with the horses and kind of like having your huddle, you know, when you come in, like to, and then keeping each other accountable for the goals that you set and just keeping an eye out for each other, what we want to see and how we're working towards those goals.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure how it's, you know, in Amish culture, but in our culture, right, a lot of times the husband is the one who's in ministry, and the wife is kind of just the side taking care of the children, not very much involved, or if she is, a lot of times it's kind of just thrown upon her, and it's never really together. A lot of times you're just kind of there, and you're there, and you're both, if you're doing ministry, you're doing ministry, but a lot of times it's not like together, in unity, working as one team.
Hello, my name is Andre. This is my wife Olga. We've been married for 15 years now. She corrected me. That was 14. It's 15 already. Who's calling? But there's a lot of questions. Can't really think of one right now. Can we probably process a little bit, come back, give somebody else a chance to introduce themselves?
I'm Adam, and this is Anna, my fiance. We're at T minus 55 or 56 days, something like that. So,
What is marriage?
I think the question is, how do I keep her from realizing that she's way out of my league, right? What do I gotta do? Is there like probably, I don't know, traits or something that you see among the happiest marriages? Is there something common, I don't know, like something you come across that you see, that you recognize, something that they do among the happiest couples or something like that?
Okay.
I have a question too. You know how that Paul said about conflicts and stuff? Like for me personally, I don't know how to deal with conflicts, so when something happens, I just cry and I can't even explain myself. So that's pretty bad probably. So if you can just say that it's okay not to agree on things and how to like be able to speak to each other during conflicts and not like hurt each other. But at the same time, like say your opinions, but not like harm the other person. That's good. Thank you.
I'm fine. This is Olga. We've only been together since January. But yeah, working on that. And then, but yeah, I don't have any questions. I just need to learn.
I'm Alex, and that's my wife, Tanya. We've been married for about 8.5 years, and don't really have any questions on here right now.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to getting to know all of you a little better by the end of the day. I tend to start big picture and then get down into the nitty gritty, but today maybe there's a couple things that came to mind as you guys were putting your questions out there that I think I'll go ahead and address up front. So how do you support each other in ministry? That was a big deal for us. I've been pastoring for many years, and I used to joke about it that I had a wife and I had a mistress, and my mistress was the church, and there was definitely a balance that we would try, and we wouldn't often make it, to keep between natural family and spiritual family, and all of that. And I'm sure that I made many mistakes along the way. But I think for a lot of young wives, it's important to realize that while you are in the season of life where you have children growing up, it's okay for that to be your primary ministry. You're wired for that. You're wired for that emotionally. Your major assignment during that season of your life is to nurture your children and to awaken their hearts and to pour into them and to watch them develop and all of that. And you're going to feel what they feel. You're going to be moved by the things that move them during that season of your life like nobody else. The father, it does not connect emotionally to the children when they're little and growing up the way that the mother does, because the mother is wired for that by God. And then when you get into your 40s per se, you're going to start going through menopause, and that's not the end of your life. That's actually the beginning of a new life. It's the end of one season of life, and God is now rewiring you for another season when you don't need that level of nurturing passion in your heart for children anymore, because your children are now growing up and they don't need you the same way anymore. Now God's rewiring you for what will often be the most fruitful, productive, and creative season of your life outside of your own family. Does that make sense? And so during those child-rearing years, the husband has to have compassion for the wife and realize she's wired for the children. She's not wired for the ministry the same way you are yet. And it's okay. And so the key is to give grace to each other for the season that you're in. And I really wish somebody could have explained this to us 40 years ago. It would have saved us a lot of tension in our marriage. And Amanda can speak to this as well. You've got a mic, right? If you've got something to add to that. But it's important to realize that often when a young man has a heart for ministry, the wife is not wired the same way during that season of life, and that's okay. And she may not be after that either. Who knows? But during the time when her children are small and growing up, that is most of the time that's her primary passion, and that's actually an assignment that God puts on her life where she's anointed to accomplish that. And it's actually a blessing to the man of God in the front lines, because he knows that he's got a warrior at home fighting the most important battles while he's on the front lines. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, because I actually didn't go on a mission trip until like
2009.
Yeah. So I was, it was a long time. I would be.
And we got married in 1982.
So I was always grateful for him to go, and I would stay back to be, take care of our children. I actually didn't have any desire to go because it was I would have not been able to relax knowing that my children were behind. We have that connection to our children. But one of the things that I am recognizing, looking back, as those years of me mothering, my children and being there for my husband were very important years for God to lay foundation. All that time, he was laying foundation in my life for this season in my life. So even though I didn't know what I was called to in ministry-wise until, 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, I got the call to ministry. I did everything in the body. I was, children, I ministered to children, did youth, and all, I filled in, but I didn't actually felt called to that, like a lot of people do, and what I am now called to. But so be aware that those years, God is laying foundations in your life. You're practicing hearing God's voice. You're being led by Him. So you are growing spiritually in a very powerful way. and God using those years of you raising your children. I also believe that it's very important for us to have connect with the women around us, because we need that fellowship. We need that connection, that community of women. And for me, I grew up because I wasn't in ministry. I didn't get behind the pulpit and speak. I see now God actually used me. I had that freedom to develop the way God wanted me to develop. Like, I didn't become somebody that God hadn't called me to. And I learned I'm a vulnerable person. I have to process, and I'm vulnerable, okay? And I'm finding the value of that now as the Lord has, as I get to share like struggles that I would go through with my, with other women, friends that I was close to, that I trusted. It gave them permission, and we would realize, wow, I'm not the only one, because often a woman will be, we have this feeling that we're the only ones that deal with these emotions that we go through. Until I began opening up and sharing, and I realized we all have those emotions, maybe not all at the same time, but we deal with those, sometimes depression or just frustration, or, and so if you can process and you can encourage one another, it's very, very powerful and empowering. So I just wanted to,
Should have mentioned also, I'm the founding pastor of Freedom Fellowship Church in Apple Creek, Ohio, and my wife is the pastor of women's ministries there. And so she's brought a whole other element to our church of really helping the women come alive.
And not just women, also.
Not just women, but especially women.
Yeah.
And on that note, Scripture talks about the older women teaching the younger. This is one of the keys to a happy marriage, actually, believe it or not, was when you realize that your husband doesn't have everything that you need. There's some things that you need to receive from older women, because your husband can't relate to everything that a woman needs, everything that a woman. So if the wife looks to her husband to answer all of her needs, it's going to be a source of conflict and dissatisfaction in the marriage. And so there has to be a community of women where the older women are teaching the younger, because they can relate to them, they can relate to their struggles, they can relate to their feelings, the emotional swings that are part of womanhood and all of that. The older women can relate to it, can really help nurture and counsel younger women in that area in a way that the husband can't, because he looks like you like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. Because the man typically cannot relate to some of those things that a woman needs to be related to and ministered to and encouraged in. And also another key to a happy marriage that I would just encourage all of you, maybe not so much a key to happiness as a key to absence of conflict, which is foundational to happiness, and that is decide right up front that you're not going to try to change each other. You can't change your wife. Wives, you can't change your husband. Only God can change both of you. Work on yourselves, not each other. Does that make sense? God, I want you to change me. I'm going to forget about trying to change my wife. I assure you, if it was possible to change your wife, I would have changed her. But I can't. And she can't change me. And when we gave that up, there was a whole level of peace that came to our relationship, and God began to change both of us, because our focus was no longer on trying to change each other. It was because every one of us comes from a different family. We have a different set of life experiences, a different set of values in each of the families that we come from. I'm not talking about spiritual values. I'm talking about just the values of everyday life, how every family does life differently, and every child is molded in that family and brings a different set of life experiences and values that we live out of into every marriage relationship. And so we're not all going to be the same, and so you have to recognize your wife was not raised in the same kind of home you were. They were different. And your husband was not raised in the same kind of home you were. They were different. And so we all bring a different set of life experiences, a different set of values, but we also all bring a different set of strengths to the relationship. And so if we focus on finding the treasure and the strengths and the giftings in each other, rather than focusing on the weaknesses and the flaws that we see, it goes a long ways.
Yeah. I want to just clarify something. When he said that we don't try to change each other, and he's not saying that we don't talk about, like if your husband does things that just annoy you or just, hurt your feelings or whatever. We're not saying that you don't talk about that you don't have, that you communicate to each other how you're responding and how that is making you feel. That's not what we're saying. It's about when we say, the reason I am this way is because of your actions. That is what it doesn't work. It's not, nobody, I think this is probably one of the most powerful things that we learn. Okay, because you might do this, or your mate might do this, or you might know somebody who does this. When they get angry and they'll say, well, I am mad because of what you said or what you did or didn't do. And the fact is, nobody has that power over us. Nobody has the power to make us respond in a negative way. We choose to do that. They might trigger us, but that is us, and that's on us, and we have to, and so that's so important that we don't let each other put that on us. And so so when we learn to say, no, I don't have that power over you. I am sorry that what I did or didn't do, but that is that I didn't. That is on you.
We're all responsible for our own actions.
Yeah, because we have to own it. And when we are blaming each other for our negative emotional reaction or response, we're not owning it. See, that's what happens is we are not owning it, and we can't change. We won't God won't be able to help us with that. So it's very important that that's a truth that is so powerful in the foundational, in the core of our relationships, is when we get to that. Yeah. And I'm going to share just a little bit with this, on this subject. I remember when, so when I was raised in a way where I was told who and what I was going to be as an Amish girl. I didn't know. I also had that personality. I needed to be loved, and so I learned that if my behavior, if I acted a certain way, people will accept me. If I acted negatively, they will reject me. So I learned to modify my behavior so people will accept me. So I learned. And Urie has a strong personality, and I learned to have a strong personality when I got born again. The Lord made me just not roll over and just not, because I don't like conflict. To this day, I don't like conflict. But the Lord, He did that like a supernatural thing in me, where gave me a backbone to stand up and be heard. Okay, I didn't do it in the right way in the beginning. You push back and you have that conflict. But then I learned to do this. And also, if you don't have children, your children, if you can have a really great marriage, and then little children will come along, and that is when often your conflict will come, because a mother's heart is very tender toward her child, and often maybe the father is a little bit more of a stern, and that hurts. And a mother will respond in a way that she might not otherwise, to try to protect her child's heart. That's very normal. Okay, so I remember when I began responding, I would say, Urie, just hear my perspective in the situation, and then you can do however you feel led. And and I told him that I wouldn't be mad at him if he didn't do it my way, because in the past I would be upset at him if he did it his own way and not mine. But that was a huge thing, because all of a sudden I began seeing his reactions and how he he responded was, it influenced how he did it after he heard my perspective. And so that really was a change. It started like changing our relationship, is me sharing my perspective and then backing off and letting him then have that freedom to make decisions that he needed to. So it's important as a mother, as a woman, to share your perspective and what you're feeling, and to be heard, because your husband needs your influence as much as you need his influence in, in your decisions and how you respond. Okay.
Culture. I don't know a whole lot about Ukrainian and Russian culture, but I can tell you about the culture that we were raised in. And I kind of joke about it a little bit, but in our culture, the man sits on the throne and the woman cleans it.
Very similar.
And so we had to learn to do things together instead of, and I'll talk a little bit more about our story, about how we got to that, but the Lord literally took us on a journey of kind of dismantling the mindsets that we grew up in, and realigning us to something that He can bless. And so it's been quite a journey, and it's exciting to be here and to share with some of you some things that may give you some tools to use. Our goal is not to make you conform to us in any way, but to help you guys to become more powerful as partners in marriage and as parents to your children. So, question, is there a burning question or two that somebody has right now? We've got just like 8 minutes before we break. It's okay if we don't. Resolving conflict. And she touched on one that's very important, and that is that we have to hear each other. And that's a challenge in most relationships, because most of the time when our wife is talking, we're thinking about the answer rather than listening to her, and vice versa. How many of you know what I'm talking about? We're trying to already figure out how we're going to respond rather than focusing on hearing her heart, and vice versa. And so learning to listen is probably one of the most important keys. It's important for us to learn to communicate clearly what we're feeling, but listening to each other is very important. And that's one that we continue to work on to this day, is to hear each other. Not just to hear the words and stumble over the words, but to hear the heart, hear what the heart is trying to convey. And we used to use a key sometimes to healthy communication, and we can kind of demonstrate it a little bit. So, Amanda, when you said that to me, it really kind of offended me, it upset me, because it reminded me of something that I grew up with, and so then she would come back, instead of reacting to what I just said, she would say, she would repeat what I said. So what you're saying is that what I said actually triggered you and made you upset because this, that, or the other. And then I would say, no, that's not what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. My mom used to talk to my dad the way that you just talked to me. And there's obviously something there that reminded me of that and hurt something in my heart when you talk. So what you're saying is that when I talked to you, you heard your mom talking to your dad. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
And then
You
I
understand?
say, I am not your mom. Yeah, but in other words, what he's saying is that sometimes when we can repeat what we're hearing until
To make sure
you
we
get
understand.
it, you get it, because when you're trying to resolve something and trying to hear each other's heart, you don't necessarily perceive really what he's saying until you keep.
So instead of her thinking how she's going to respond to me, if she can be focused on trying to understand what I'm saying, repeat it back to me. So is this what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not what I'm saying. This is what I'm trying to say. Oh, so you're trying to say that, yes, that's what I'm trying. So before you even go to the answer, you make sure you understand what that person's saying. Does that make sense?
And in doing that, there's a couple keys that is happening, or things that are being unveiled. Sometimes, okay, just for instance, if I do something that would trigger Urie, he would respond, right? So I'm wanting to hear why he did that. Most of the time, he has no idea why he did it, right? But he's telling me what he's feeling, and me, in the process of me trying to understand, he is actually coming to realize what is going on, because he's trying to find words and trying to express what he's feeling, and I get to, you know what I mean? So it's so powerful because we're discovering what is actually, when we respond negatively, there's something, it's not the issue really that is causing that you need to come to a resolution. It's actually a wound usually, or something inside you. So it's really powerful.
So probably 28 years ago or so, we were in the middle of one of these conflicts that got heated. And praise the Lord, we made some rules early on. We never laid a hand on each other. There's some words that we never said. We never said the D word, divorce. We never went there. There's
just thought it.
Now, in our culture, we come, up until our marriage, I don't think there'd ever been a divorce on either side of our family. We come from a long line of, you're committed to marriage for life, and that's just the way it is. And so those are some of the values that we brought into our relationship. And so you got to work through stuff, There's no escape hatch. There's no parachute that you can put on to jump out of this plane. You're in the plane until it lands or crashes, okay? And so we were in the middle of one of these major conflicts one night, and I heard the Lord say to me, "You're fighting ghosts." I said, "Really? We're fighting ghosts? What do you mean?" And he said, "You're fighting against your mom, and she's fighting against her dad." I'm like, oh my goodness. Then I remembered that I made a vow when I was a kid, and I would hear the way that my dad would treat my mom.
Your mom would treat your dad.
The way that my mom would treat my dad, that my wife is never going to treat me that way. And the same way, she made a vow when she was a little girl that her husband is never going to treat her the way that her dad treated her mom. And so whenever she'd raise her voice, I'd hear my mom. Whenever I'd raise my voice, she would hear her dad. And so we forgave our parents, and we asked the Lord to release us from that generational cycle that was trying to repeat itself in our relationship. And as we did that, and then we prayed together, and as we did that, the phone rings. And it was a resort company saying, "Guess what? We're going to offer you a free weekend away for a vacation, all expenses paid, if you will listen to one of these timeshare sales pitches for an hour." Yeah, we can do that. I know how to say no problem. So basically, it felt like the Lord was just saying, "Look, I'm going to bless your marriage to let you know how pleased I am that you got the message and that you're willing to work through." And so we had a wonderful weekend away in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So,
but another thing we learned through that is that sometimes when we would have this conflict, you would look at our marriage now. We have such an amazing marriage right now. Now that I I never imagined that we could come to this place. So I'm just like, you know, encourage anybody, it doesn't matter where you're at, if you're, you know, you can, you know, many people just decide they're gonna just divorce and just start over. You're just gonna have it again. You know, it's not gonna be magically changed. So why not try with the one you are at, you know, that you're with, and decide you're gonna have the best marriage possible, and you can have it. But I sometimes because Urie is really like stubborn, I'm telling you, you know,
I'm actually steadfast.
Yeah, no, he has his personality is the high D.
I couldn't do what I'm called to do if I wasn't.
No, and I appreciate that, and that's another thing we're gonna get into, is that how I would never be who I am today if it wouldn't be for him. And vice versa. Urie would never, because I taught him to get in touch with his heart. And he taught me to have a backbone and to fight for my destiny and have a voice. He taught me that. And so the Lord, one time I was like really feeling sorry for myself, and I'm like, God, you know, just, Urie is being so mean, and, you know, and the Lord said, you know what kind of children you would be raising if you were a single parent? And he said, I'm like, okay. And he's like, you would have children that would have big hearts, but they would be total wimps. They wouldn't be able to live into their destiny, no matter how big of their hearts would have been, if they didn't have a backbone to fight and stand up and be willing to clean up their messes, own their stuff, and, you know.
Because that's what we're called to bring to our children. The fathers are called to bring them vision, courage, and discipline. And the mother is called to nurture them, help them get in touch with their hearts, and to grow up emotionally healthy.
Yeah. But one of the things that we learned too often when we had that breakthrough is when we would be in conflict, and he would look at me and he'd say, honey, I am not your enemy. And he would remind me. And I'm like, yes, you're right. And I would remind him at times too that I am not his enemy. And so that was really helping us.
And sometimes we'd remind each other, listen, I'm not your dad.
Yeah, you're not the mom, yeah. So when you, so that was a huge key. That was a key for us to sometimes to kind of break it. That's when we're in the heat of it. I'm sure none of you have ever gotten into that, but you know, just in case you ever meet anybody that it needs to hear that, we're going to share that with you.
Yeah, we'll break for 15 minutes and let you guys